Hello and a warm welcome to the France 24 interview. And just before we begin, we don't get to do this every day. I have to start by humbly offering one red rose to our guest here today. This is on behalf of the entire France 24 newsroom. And we don't do this every day. The reason we're doing this is because my guest today is Elaine Cellino. She's Paris correspondent for the New York Times, and she took time out to write this book. It's called La Séduction, How the French Play the Game of Life. And in the book, Elaine argues that seduction is the key to understanding France, not just how the French relate to each other, but how they conduct business and even elect their politicians. Well, Elaine, you claim in the book that every Frenchman has or tries to have le regard, as you call it. Does this look anything like le regard, or do I still need to take classes?
With those beautiful baby blue eyes behind those glasses, you're doing pretty well, yes.
Elaine, first question, and actually we have to get serious because this book is coming out at a time when, of course, there is one major story here in France, which is the DSK affair. Dominique Strauss-Kahn, the former French finance minister and the now former International Monetary Fund chief, he has been indicted on charges of attempted rape. Now, the book does not talk about this. The book talks about seduction. The reason we're talking about Strauss-Kahn here is because you had actually mentioned him in your book as one example among many others of French politicians who were known to be gallivanting. This is what you write about Strauss-Kahn. Rumors that he is a womanizer have livened up Paris dinner parties for years, with some people expressing quiet admiration that such a high-profile political figure can find time for an active social life. And by social life, you mean womanizing. Do you feel that any of what's happening now, or any of the talk about French politicians' personal lives post-DSK, vindicates the main thesis in your book?
One has to draw a distinction between seduction, which can be a game, it can be a war between the sexes, and attempted rape, which is a crime. We're talking about two different things. One can be acceptable, one can certainly lead to sexual harassment, which in the US is criminal, and in some cases in France is criminal. And then there is crossing the line, which is committing a serious violent crime, which is what he's being accused of.
Well, you're certainly right to point out that, of course, there's a huge difference. Your book deals with seduction, and the main thesis is that this is how you understand French people. And now, I want to know, when I saw the cover of your book, La Séduction, I thought, well, this is maybe a little cliche, understanding the French through the prism of seduction. It's been said before. So I'm wondering, you lived in Paris many times as New York Times correspondent and former bureau chief. What point did you think, bam, this is it. I understand the French. It's all about seduction.
It happened completely by chance. I was asked to give a speech at the New York Public Library in 2008 on France. It was a year after Sarkozy had been elected president. He had married Carla Bruni a couple of months before. And I thought, how am I going to make a speech that isn't really boring? So I thought, okay, I can tell my audience how France is dealing with its special forces in Afghanistan, or how France is returning to the military wing of NATO. But I had read a book written by a young guy in the foreign ministry all about the most beautiful women in Paris, how to find beautiful women in Paris. And I thought, you know what, this is the key. And so I got up before this audience and I said, you know what, the key to understanding France is seduction. It's the driving force, it's the motor. My editor from my last book, which was on Iran, a very different kind of book, was in the audience. And afterwards he came up to me and he said, Elaine, this is your next book. Voila. So I took some time off, signed a contract, and then I was trapped and had to somehow make the thesis work, I guess.
All right, describe to our viewers what happened when, I believe it was the first time that you met the then French President Jacques Chirac, and he kissed you. And I have to say, this is actually going to be appropriate even for younger audiences. So what happened?
Well, it wasn't the first time I'd met Chirac, but it was the first time I had met him in Paris as Paris bureau chief. I had just arrived. I was very serious. I had been chief diplomatic correspondent. I had been the correspondent covering the CIA. I arrived in Paris for a serious interview with the New York Times foreign editor, and we were talking about Iraq. This was a very tense time before the war in Iraq in 2002, and he greeted me with a baise-main, or a kiss of the hand. For me, an American, serious, arriving on a Sunday morning, dressed in a suit, ready to arrive in a conversation as equals, I was déstabilisée. I was unnerved because I thought, okay, what's going on here? It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't sexual, but it made clear that he was the man and I was the woman.
And how did that make you feel?
Something interesting is going on here that I don't understand.
You know, it's funny, when I read your book, I thought, when I began doing reporting here at France 24, I was asking questions, interviewing, and I couldn't get very interesting answers. And the colleague next to me who was filming, he took me to one side afterwards and he said, look, this is the problem. You have to make love to people. He said this in French. You have to make love to people. I said, what do you mean? He says, you need to seduce them and bring them into your world, or rather encourage them to bring you into theirs. And that's how you get interesting answers. I'm sure as a reporter, because you're looking at all this from an outside perspective, but I'm sure even as an American reporter, you do that. You make love to the people you interview.
I would never have used that image in my life, Cyril. You have just taught me something, and I wish I had interviewed you for the book, because that's brilliant. Americans deal with their subjects differently. As an American woman reporter, I would come in, sit there with my notebook, and start asking questions. I mean, I had to learn along the way that you don't pull out the notebook right away. You start a conversation, you talk about one's family, maybe you have lunch, you eat, blah, 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 and you don't ask the serious questions until well into the second hour, perhaps, or at least into the second half hour. I had to learn. It was really a process, an evolving process, just as it was for you.
True. Do French politicians have a higher propensity to sleep around than other politicians do?
I have absolutely no idea, because I've never been in any of their bedrooms, and so I don't know. But I do know that extramarital sex and having a political leader, a male political leader, who's considered virile and potent is accepted, and in some cases even celebrated.
Now, we see footage of current French President Nicolas Sarkozy as you speak, and you say in your book he was not a good seducer when he began his campaign for the presidential election.
He's very complicated because he has the ability to seduce. He certainly seduced the French electorate in getting elected, and he seduced the American Congress in a wonderful, wonderful event where he gave a speech before the American Congress that was completely rewritten in order for him to make love with the American Congress, to use your metaphor. He put his hand on his heart. He eliminated all of the negative phrases about America. He talked about American culture, how he loves Elvis Presley and American movies. And he, without sending one soldier to Iraq, he seduced the Congress. They gave him a standing ovation, which was quite extraordinary.
That was the Congress, but what about with French people? And how do you see his re-election bid in the light of his, let's say, his deficit of seduction power?
I never make predictions about politics. I never make a prediction about a presidential outcome, because we are in a moment of complete transformation right now.
Let me rephrase it. Is he doing a good job at seducing the French now?
No. No, look at the polls. You don't need me to tell you that he's low in the polls. But he is setting himself up to seduce once again. And I would not rule him out. Strauss-Kahn, it's clear he will not be a presidential candidate. The socialists still don't have a viable candidate who has risen to the surface. Carla Bruni is now pregnant, and Sarkozy because he can be so extraordinarily disciplined, could make a comeback. A lot depends on the French economy.
In the last chapter of your book, you call it Seduce or Die, and you describe the French as lamenting the loss of power and influence of France in the world. France is no longer the huge world power that it once was a long time ago. What is your message to the French? You're saying you spend too much time seducing, but you're not in the real world economy, you're not being efficient, you don't know how to do things as well as Americans do?
France eventually will have to blend seduction with practicality. Seduction is all about process. Seduction is about the anticipation. Seduction is about memory. Seduction is the 4-hour meal that you have on a Sunday afternoon, not let's just eat because one has to eat if one wants to survive. Seduction is the elegant swordsman, where the Americans might shoot to kill. But in this world where everything is too fast, where we're driven by the internet and speed and results, if France is going to thrive in a global economy, there will have to be changes, and that's going to require less seduction and more efficiency.
Less seduction, more efficiency for France. Thank you very much, Elaine Chilino, for coming on set and presenting to us your book, La Séduction, How the French Play the Game of Life. Thank you so much for coming on set, Elaine.
Thank you very much.
For watching the show. Take care. Bye-bye.